So Trump decides to say that the Democrats are bringing the world closer to World War III. Trump the peacemaker. Ugh. I don't know what you did, Fermilab, with that Hadron Collider or whatever the heck it is, but somehow we are in this crazy timeline. So here we are. Trump, Donald Trump, peacemaker of our time. Like, watch. Like, somebody will say he needs to get a Nobel Peace Prize. And, I think maybe his Peace Prize will be more deserving than Obama's. So former U.S. President Donald Trump has blamed his successor, Joe Biden, and his rival in next month's presidential election, Vice President Kamala Harris, for a retaliatory strike by Iran on Israel on Tuesday night. Because, of course, hey, listen, we have to have these ongoing wars, right? The Republican nominee discussed the latest escalation in the Middle East crisis during a campaign rally in Waukene, Wisconsin, and posted a similar statement on his Truth Social platform. He accused the Biden administration of failing to keep Iran in check and claimed that he would have done a better job. Okay, here we go. Trump claimed that under his presidency, Tehran was starved for cash, fully contained, and desperate to make a deal. Kamala flooded them with American cash, and ever since, they've been exporting terror all over. Woogie, boogie, boogie. Of course. So, Trump, you're not being a peacemaker. All right, war or the threat of war is raging everywhere, and two incompetents running this country are leading us to the brink of World War III. The Democrats win next month's election, the world goes up in smoke. Tehran described its attack as retaliation for Israel's assassination of senior figures in the militant movements of Hamas and Hezbollah on Iranian Lebanese soil. The two regional rivals have made opposing claims about the effectiveness of the ballistic missile strike. Israel has promised a response, which the media predict will come within days. Here we go. Here we go. World War III. Hey, listen, I'm speaking for myself, but, when I wake up doing this show, and I love doing this show, and I do my morning run, get myself fresh and fit, no pun intended, and ready to do this show, I usually have a cup of coffee, and I look out my window because I am able to see the Chicago skyline. I swear to God, if I see a nuclear cloud happen, I'm going to be very disappointed. I'm going to be like, son of a... Both main U.S. political parties are offering what appears to be unconditional support for Israel's actions. This position appears to have become something of liability for Democrats, as a noble portion of their supporters have protested against continued shipments of weapons to Israel as it conducted the military siege of the Palestinian enclave of Gaza. Hey, longshoremen! I thought you had that thing on lockdown. Nah, that was not going to happen. Listen. The longshoremen know one thing: never disrupt the military-industrial complex. Israel's getting its weapons. Ukraine is getting its weapons. This isn't open for a debate. That's going to happen. The uncommitted movement has threatened... No, the uncommitted movement has not threatened to withhold their votes unless it's the regular people. The leadership decided to bend over backwards for it. But there's a problem. There's an ongoing problem because, continuing on with this, Biden confronts the limits of his influence over Israel. That's right. Biden's upset that Israel's not listening to him. President Joe Biden and his senior aides have urged Israel to avoid direct attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities when it strikes back against Tehran, the latest sign of the limits of U.S. power to prevent all but the most extreme actions by Israel. Listen, I'm going to say something controversial here in a 3, 2, and an uno. We, the United States, are a global superpower. We're the empire, right? Now we know who runs things. AIPAC's smartest move was buying all our politicians. After hundreds of Iranian rockets and missiles again rained down on Israel on Tuesday, the Biden administration is settling for limiting Israel's response rather than discourage it entirely, according to two administration officials. Both were granted anonymity because they weren't authorized to publicly discuss private conversations. You don't say. The directive illustrates the limits of Biden's warning influence over events in the Middle East and acknowledges that he may be unable to stop what his administration has spent a year trying to prevent: a regional war. Well, that's news to me. That's news to me. World War III. Guys, hold on. Let's have democracy in the chat. Type 1 if you think Biden's been doing everything he can to prevent the regional war and that he's been working hard, that I'm wrong, that he's been doing it. Type 2, no, I haven't been preventing it. They've been sitting on their wazoos the whole time. I wonder how many 2s will be in the chat. The last time Israel successfully defended itself against an Iranian attack in April, Biden urged Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to take the win and not escalate the conflict further. Biden, you senile old bat. That's not going to happen. But the dynamics both in the Middle East and Washington have changed dramatically in the last 6 months. Iran's Tuesday attack was larger and closer to Israel's population centers. It comes after Israel first unleashed a stunning intelligence operation that crippled Iran's top military proxy, Hezbollah, and then fought with the terror group across the border in Lebanon. It took place with Biden, now a lame duck, trying to salvage a pair of Middle East ceasefire deals, while hawkish Republicans call for action against Tehran and the Middle East threatens to overwhelm the election between his chosen successor, Vice President Kamala Harris, and the evil orange boogeyman, Donald Trump. Israel made clear that it would respond forcefully to Iran. Netanyahu, in a public address shortly after the attack in Tehran, would pay for it, adding, "We will stand by the rule we've established. Whoever attacks, we will attack them." This isn't going to stop. Folks, I do hope that there is peace. And if Trump, let's say if Trump were to get elected into office, I do hope that he could maybe do a ceasefire. But I think that's not going to happen. Biden on Wednesday told reporters that he did not support an Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear sites, though he didn't provide specifics on conversations with Israel on that risk. And so there's another danger that's around the horizon, okay? And that is the ongoing censorship and the ongoing wave of censorship that's going to be happening. Because if there is to be a conflict that's going to intensify, you better believe that words are going to be double-checked and triple-checked all over social media. I want to pull up this video from Glenn Greenwald on the state of censorship, because all of this is intertwined. All of this is going to be connected. And every one of us in independent media are going to be affected by this should this conflict get out of hand.
Is on MS.
Let me take that back. It is out of hand. Let's just say it gets out of a hand times 11.
NBC in December of 2022. He's on the very prestigious show of Joy Reid, and they were discussing the kinds of censorship that had been taking place in the United States. And in defense of it, here's what Tim Walz said.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
There's no First Amendment guarantee to disinformation or hate speech. That's just blatantly false. You think you could put people in prison in the United States for disinformation or misinformation that the government thinks is wrong? Oh, that person said that they think the COVID pandemic came from a lab leak, whereas we've already concluded that it didn't, and therefore they're spreading disinformation, and now we can punish them because disinformation falls outside of the scope of the First Amendment. That's called the Ministry of Truth, when the government can declare truth and falsity and punish people for expressing ideas that they claim is false. And it's even worse to say that the First Amendment doesn't protect quote unquote hate speech, since obviously all sorts of people express hateful sentiments all the time that are well within the protections of the First Amendment, and that would have to be. Tim Walz isn't the only person who thinks the First Amendment, falsely thinks the First Amendment excludes speech that governments consider to be hate speech. His running mate, Kamala Harris, seeking to be the president of the United States, be elected president in 36 days, said something quite similar when she was running for president. This is before she had to drop out before the first vote was cast because her campaign was such a debacle. But she was giving a speech to the NAACP, and she expressed very similar views about this extremely cramped, limited, ahistorical, and false understanding of what the First Amendment does and doesn't protect.
And will put the Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms.
And see, this is where this conflict that Israel could probably do with Iran also impact our ability to talk about it. Anybody that did a video, especially if you look back to what happened in April when the first attacks were happening, if you were an independent media network, I know a couple of people, if you showed anything like that or showed that video, hey, you were hit. If you cover, especially during the early days of the war in Ukraine, it's either your video was taken down or limited or shadow banned or just removed out of the ether altogether. It wasn't going to be looked up. And this plays for a bigger story, and that is everything is going to be put on that chopping block of censorship. Everything is going to be up to be taken by big tech. So, you know, it's one thing for Trump to say, hey, Democrats are causing World War III. You know, Trump, you didn't help the situation by also having that missile drone strike attack against that Iranian general on Iranian soil way back in 2020, where we're living in very interesting and questionable times in which our whole entire society is witnessing a government, our government, become absolutely powerless in global affairs. You would think, like back in the day, the United States would have done something to intervene, but Biden can't. And the reason why is because as the decades progress, especially, you know, all of us millennials and Gen Xers who were growing up young, I mean, we remember a time when the United States did flex its power, but during that time, the insidious reach of the military-industrial complex, big oil, APAC, et cetera, began buying off our politicians. And now the one thing they want to do now is get rid of that thing that we call the First Amendment, free speech. Once big tech weighs in, once the corporations get their power, you better believe that that axe is coming down.
Because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, if you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community.
Political police. I am Commissar Hans. Fall in line. You have been speaking out against the war. You will own nothing and be happy.
Honestly, that seems very hateful to me. That whole clip that we just watched her spouting, threatening people that if they say things that she thinks constitutes disinformation, she's going to unleash the Justice Department on them, or they're going to punish social media platforms for permitting ideas that Kamala Harris thinks is disinformation, punish them for not censoring it. Not only, by the way, is that hate speech, it's also profound disinformation to suggest that the First Amendment somehow would permit the Justice Department to be weaponized and abused that way. The difference between myself, though, and people like her and Tim Walz is that I don't actually think she should be censored despite spouting massive amounts of disinformation and hateful speech as she did just in that clip alone, let alone all the other times she's done it. Tim Walz has been caught lying continuously about half of his biography. So is Joe Biden. And these people want to say that it's somehow consistent with the First Amendment to punish people for spouting disinformation as they do that continuously and all the time, including Tim Walz doing it on the stage last night and Kamala Harris doing it in that clip.
It's madness. It's madness. And the thing is, everything has been leading up to this point. It's very sad that we're here now because I don't think any of us could have really predicted that there would have been such a global conflict of this scale. I know that a lot of liberals were saying that if Trump got reelected in 2020, he would start World War III. Well, that happened under Biden. Conflict in Ukraine, escalation in Taiwan, and the genocide that's happening in Gaza, which is now leading for Israel to do military strikes and operations in Lebanon and in Iran. Say it with me. What could go wrong? So much can and will go wrong. But I think we all knew that one of the things that the establishment will want to do is silence and suppress. And that's something that both Democrats and Republicans have been working together on. Now, do I think there's a possibility for maybe a ceasefire? At this point, we've crossed the point of no return. I like to be idealistic and say, yes, a sit down must happen. But so many people have died. So much has been going on. And the thing is, we're not going to get it. And I don't know what's going to happen the rest of this month in regards to leading up to the election night. But we have to be ready. We have to be ready at all times. And we have to be more involved politically now in regards to our infrastructure and what we are seeing. I expect more from our politicians. I would expect more. I would expect leadership to be presented before the American people, but we're not getting that.
If you fool me once, it's because I didn't think a guard was needed. If you fool me twice, it's because I didn't learn the lesson, so it bears repeating. If you try the same play 3 times running, it's because you know what's coming, and you didn't come to lead, you came to purposefully be misleading. Democracy is dry. It's been a century bleeding. The husk is gaping open to the sky, out in the field where all the sheep just keep on circling and worrying and bleeding. They're waiting for the shepherd that they've tried to hide their faith in, but he's so appealing. They'd gladly give their fleece. It's such a freeing feeling that even when he leads them to the ledge and starts to urge them on, they're positively beaming. They were told that they were on their way to save democracy, so even as they plummet, they just gloat. They don't consider screaming. And halfway up the cliff, the shepherd's cozy little mittens wrap around the staff of shattered human hopes on which he's leaning. He shows the gentle grin that used to stir your inner spark, and he says, "Not me, us," as he gestures to the oligarchs. He knows that if he runs, they're going to stop him like a stolen car. And he'll easily surrender because it bought a lot of time for laying mines in all the grassroots. Suddenly, the tiniest of movements gets you blown apart. Suddenly, you're in a play that's set on an election day and voting for the fire, unaware you're playing Joan of Arc. Suddenly, the shepherd pulls the rug and slips a hood across your clueless mug, and everything goes zero dark. I'm gonna warn you once more before it's 2024 and you fuck around and find out who your heroes are. To take a step back from the herd, and you'll learn that you can spot who all the shearers are. If you really want to know the product that they're selling, I can take you where the mirrors are. If you think your voice is finally ready, I can tell you where the lyrics are. I hid them in a box I had to bury neath the cobble when they carpet bombed the promenade and raided all the street bazaars. Now all we've got's the marketplace, and you're too broke to even bother asking what the options for your treatment are. Suddenly, the raw debris of homeless human dignity will find it has 100 teeth for every badge and sweeper's arm. Suddenly, they speak in solidarity and each is armed. Suddenly, the sheep can see the shepherd for his truest form and all pitch in at once to help him buy the farm. And now it's zero dark, and all is calm and peaceful save the distant wail of sirens that approach beside the flames of dawn. Suddenly, the carrot's just a string that's on a stick, and all your movements make you sick because the prize is gone. Now, we could go and flee into the forest low and meek, or we can exercise our right to feast and go and graze on Biden's lawn. Because he's been sowing seeds that seep a toxin out to sap a bit from each of us and keep on leaching decades after Biden's gone. So regardless who they summon out of hell to come and do the job, it will not feel like Biden's gone. But in that time of hopelessness, you cannot trust the shepherd when he once again comes asking you to humor him his siren song. And it's cute that you can innocently, honestly assume that's just a symptom of a system that was wired wrong, and not the standard feature, basic function, primary objective of a mass hypnosis firebomb. You don't need to know the words to cry along. Someday it'll hit you like an officer who pistol whipped their ride along. Broke his jaw and kept his job and kept it moving right along. That voting isn't red or blue or black or white or right or wrong. Voting's like a firing squad where you can choose the firearm. It's slow extinction by and large. It's Super Tuesday supercharged. It's all your futures, roots and all, just tossed out on a garbage barge. It's everybody dropping out, to push the biggest oligarch. It's everybody voting fire, registered as Joan of Arc.